Hey everyone, it's Zach with Palantir Research. We've got another week in the market done for Palantir, but NHS doctors are showing their support here. However, it still falls short of any awarding of the FTP contract, as well as some interesting price action to close out the week, especially on Friday, but I'll also catch up on all the little news in between. So looking at the stock price first, we had some crazy price movement this week. For the week, we are down around 6.5%, right above the $16 mark. Now this week, we did hit into the low $18, but ultimately it could not sustain, and the majority of the downturn actually took place on Friday. Now, news-wise, specifically to the company driving this down, in my opinion, there's nothing really to note here. Maybe you could argue the lack of news around the NHS contract not being resolved, but mostly due to the whole market reacting to Jerome Powell saying that rates still have to be higher to deal with the persistent inflation. So this is not surprising for a stock like Palantir, and to react to the news this way, that's expected. So for me personally, it's still noise and is expected for someone holding this long term, but still something to keep an eye on here. Now, what was all the news happening this week? I'll cover the videos I made, of course, but then the little things that I haven't covered. So first video, I covered the Bloomberg interview of Dan Ives, and he remains bullish on Palantir. This is not surprising. He spoke on their military business and possible ties to the Israeli Defense Forces, or IDF. Now, we don't know if that was more speculative or actually something he knows for sure, but it still points and notes how close Palantir is to the United States government. And if you've been watching the latest news, the US is basically standing beside Israel in this conflict and sending out a lot of military support with aircraft carriers nearby in the region. But Dan Ives also points out that there is still a mismatch in understanding by the market of Palantir as an AI player and an underappreciated gem here, so he still thinks there's a difference here. Basically, he's still bullish on Palantir with the upcoming geopolitical tensions, and this is not surprising news. He just goes on the news though to spread it to everyone. Then in the same video, I also covered a contract revealed by the Financial Times that Palantir was paid about £4.5 million back in September 2022, and that's for their work with the UK government that helps them to manage the Ukrainian refugees from the Ukrainian war. But just recently, they grew that contract by 22% for another year, signing in September 2023, and that's for £5.5 million. So it's always great to see them growing contracts, even if I think for this particular one, it may not be around for the long haul, especially since it requires the conflict to continue with more refugees coming. But great use case, of course, for future needs of the UK to handle refugees, or for other nearby countries to implement something similar and handle that kind of case. Now, the next video I made covered Ukraine's Minister of Digital Transformation, Mykhailo Fedorov, who shared a demo of their use of AIP in regards to reconstruction. So this is non-military. So the tweet is up here, but basically it's an example of how they could use Palantir outside of the war context. When running the demo, it appeared similar to a lot of other demonstrations by Palantir, like an analyst chatting and getting those answers from the computer that they need, and also to set up a project schedule timeline, which of course is talking to everything else, to safely set up how they can rebuild schools, but take into account the dangers like minefields or other kinds of blockades or just active war zones nearby, and of course certain areas can get their construction done sooner or later. So the big deal here is that this is the first glimpse of reconstruction that we know about Palantir, and they have officially partnered with Ukraine on this matter here. And besides the refugee relocation, which is outside that military part here, this is the only use case that we've pretty much seen so far. Then I also covered in another video Allen Industries briefly. It was a partnership announced by the company itself on X, and doing a quick Google search on the company name, you may have been redirected or just directed to palantirtechnologies.com, which is a completely different company. It's a cleaning company, but the actual one here is for palantirtechnologies.net, which is different. They're a small consulting firm for SaaS software, specifically for the agriculture, manufacturing, and healthcare businesses. Their specific post was in regards to agriculture and how they plan to help clients with their data from supply chain all the way to the futures market for selling crops and everything in between here. So think of a one-stop shop for your data if you are on the agricultural side. Now, there's more to see how this turns out here. It's just a small article, but it's always nice to see a new partner here. Now, what I haven't made videos on, Palantir continues to ramp up their marketing on X here. There's a few tweets, actually. They tweeted out some new FedStart partners first, making sure to note this makes an 18-month process, and they slimmed it down to 6 weeks for potential partners. This is a game-changing aspect, especially for startups and small businesses that want to get into business with the government, but they can't put that time, money, and resources into achieving and maintaining their IL certification. So I've covered a lot of these partners here before, but some of them are newer, of course. A lot of them actually are AI companies if you do look through them, and trying to get a little niches here to help the government in little ways. So don't miss out on checking them out there. You can look into more detail on your own. The value proposition is so apparent and blatant in my opinion. If you're taking 18 months, a couple $1,000,000 plus any maintenance to actually keep that, and then just change it down to 6 weeks if you go with Palantir, where you kind of just let them handle everything except the stuff that you can really focus on, then your business can do what's best for the government and provide that value because you're not dealing with all these other things of just maintaining your security. So if you're going to keep the customer happy that way, I think Palantir has a very sticky solution in this case. So I've mentioned in previous videos that cover this FedStart program, this can help their type of monopoly, let's say, or at least a huge gap in the market that Palantir can fill with their routing, and that they provide is just much easier for companies to do and try out and see how it is to work with the government. And this could be before they want to make that large commitment of getting IELTS certified themselves. But hopefully at that point, at least as a Palantir investor, that they're just going to stay so sticky to it that they don't even feel like they need to get their own IELTS certification. So more to see if they can expand this program even more. Then, Palantir also released a short 40-second trailer advertising their AIP boot camps. So nothing new information-wise here, but they are making it more worldwide where they just want to get the word out that the companies and organizations should at least hear about it and possibly sign up and take a chance here. They're trying to get customers to the top of their funnel and even put an example of a client from Trinity Jobs where they got the results they wanted in less than 8 hours from an AIP boot camp, and they were able to present to their CEO the next day. So I think that's a very powerful statement here that even with a boot camp like this with no strings attached, I'm assuming that you can get a real use case that someone is confident enough to present to their C-suite there. And then on a lighter note, Palantir is going to space. Well, one of their mission ops leads, who's a payload specialist, Kelly Girardi, will be going to suborbital space with Virgin Galactic, or ticker symbol SPCE for those who actually followed that. This was actually one of those companies that experienced similar mania actually to Palantir in 2021. They went public through a SPAC. I won't comment on their business and financials. Honestly, it's not my cup of tea, to be honest, but they do some cool stuff, of course, making suborbital space travel for tourism and science experiments much more accessible with their reputable spacecraft. Now, for the NHS contract, I've covered in previous videos that they wanted to award the NHS contract sometime mid-October, and that time seems to have gone and passed. If you've been searching around, there have been several articles basically just trying to pull Palantir away from the deal and really trying to muddy the water around who can win this contract. One did particularly catch my eye that there was some assurances by a few doctors, and I seem to have missed this letter, or maybe it was buried, but the one reference in the register tries to make the narrative that Palantir has not won because they wouldn't put effort into trying to win over the public, and they're talking about NHS England. So I think the opposite actually is this, as if they did win, but they want to make sure that there are some people on board here, or at least the public is. And we can speculate all we want, but this signed letter basically covers that these doctors who've signed it worked closely with the trials and studies and see the value in the new FDP platform because it will allow healthcare workers to provide the best care and not deal with the technological difficulties. Now, they don't say Palantir by name in this letter, but they reference their work with the COVID response, and this new platform made a difference in the response and management of the supplies during that crisis. And then for all of us, this is obviously Palantir because we've known about this. But what I like also is that they provided a quantitative metric saying they reduced long-term stays by 36% at the North Tees and Hartlepool Trust. Now, of course, they're not attributing that particularly to Palantir, but it's using this new technology with the FDP and tying all these patient records together. So in the end, this is all very important for these doctors to put a stand here because they're saying that it actually works. Now, the way that people are going to spin it, of course, like the register, they may see it one way, but at least we got more information out there that something is at least happening here to try to push the deal through. But yeah, a lot of different news here. I know it didn't seem as heavy hitting, but what are your thoughts on all this? Let me know below, and thank you all for watching, and I appreciate my channel members, and I'll see you in the next video.